is in Atlanta, and he has many colleagues who he wanted to share this with, so, and friends. So, are we ready, Casey?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, everybody's heard already the introduction of Julian, and it's just so great to see this man with us today in this capacity, not just passing us in the communion line on a holiday, which is wonderful. It always lifts my heart, but this is just so great. So that's the introduction I'm going to give.
That's perfect.
Julian, okay. Thank you for
Sure.
being here. And
Of course.
please introduce your girlfriend.
I will. So for those of you that don't know or don't remember, my name is Julian Rose. Like was said earlier, I am the son of Winston and Ruth Rose, who were leading us through worship this morning. Want to say hi to y'all. This is my beautiful girlfriend, Brittany. We're down here in Atlanta. I met her here in Atlanta. It's going to be one of the things that I touch on a little bit later when I speak about some of the things I've been up to. And so I guess I'll just go ahead and get started, but I wanted to express my extreme gratitude for being invited. I think the last time that I addressed the whole church or like a large segment of the church was when I was graduating from high school. And I remember I drove down the morning after my prom, very exhausted, and I delivered a graduation address, speech, whatever, very unprepared. And because of that, I was thinking about referencing it in what I talk about today, but I don't remember what I said. But what I do know is that my mom frequently says that I called Sunday school corny, and she brings that up a lot because my mom runs a lot of the Sunday school activities. But I'm trying to pull in what I've been up to since high school, since I graduated, since I made that address. And when I left for school, for college, it felt like I was leaving a village in some ways. And I'd like to describe what I've been up to since then as trying to grow more villages. And so we'll get into the idea of what that means and what our community means in a little bit. But I did want to start off by saying that not everyone gets a village or the village. That's all I'm really here to talk about, what it looks like to grow more villages and potentially make this one bigger. Ideally, a village is a community where all of its members have the resources and support and protection and safety and love that is needed to survive. That's what I had here at Trinity, and that's what you all have had the privilege to enjoy as well. And I've spent the last 8 years almost obsessing over who is missing from the village, who's been excluded, who was forced to build their own village elsewhere. What does that look like? It's funny, I was up at about 1 a.m. last night trying to prepare for this, and my parents know that I never write notes or anything like that when I'm addressing things, but this felt important. And I'm looking at my notes now and realizing how many concepts were already addressed, whether it's in the Bible or whether it was in the Book of Common Prayer. I feel like my work's been done for me already. I could probably just hang out here with you all for the next hour or so. But so the work of social justice is expanding who's cared for, and building peace through accounting for the harms that have been done in the past. A large reason why we're not experiencing peace right now is because we haven't really accounted for those harms. And I'll come back to that in a little bit as well. But let me actually tell you what I've been up to since graduating high school and leaving Hartford. So I went to college. I went to University of Connecticut. I was majoring in biomedical engineering, but much to my parents' dismay, I was spending lots of my time doing things that had nothing to do with engineering at all. I quickly started learning about society and history and concepts of social justice. I took classes called social problems and gender and sexuality and human rights. And those things kind of shifted the way I viewed the world. I got involved in some programs that whole focus was about preventing gender-based violence. That's sexual assault and domestic violence. And that made me think further about the way that men show up in the world and how we can further show up with, in solidarity with women and protecting them. I got involved in Teach for America in my freshman year, a program that seeks to end educational inequities. One of the missions of Trinity, in starting the school. And I also got involved in student organizing. Now, why would students need to be organizing? Well, the issues that are impacting our society also show up on college campuses. And in that little microcosm of society, folks are also realizing their power in trying to address those things. Leaving college, I joined Teach for America, again to my parents' dismay, because I had this degree in biomedical engineering and I decided to teach science instead of working in the field immediately. And I taught science, middle school science at Jamoki Academy, which is right across the street from Trinity. And in that experience, I really learned that there are a number of privileges that you can have. I'll never forget one of my students telling me that just because you're Black and Caribbean, it does not mean that you understand what we're going through. And mind you, most of my students were also Black and of Caribbean descent. That told me that I really had to work harder to understand, and that I couldn't lean on my intentions. I could not lean on those intentions in feeling like I was doing enough. From Teach for America, I spent 2 years teaching, and I decided to go to graduate school. Um, I'm currently enrolled in Georgia Tech and Emory University. I'm studying for a Ph.D. in biomedical engineering right now. But one of the things that motivated me to even study biomedical engineering in the first place is also social justice. Because there are health disparities, right? There are things that affect different groups of people, diseases, there are public health concerns, and we're seeing that in COVID right now, with the number of deaths disproportionately affecting Black communities and poor communities. So I believe health is deeply connected to social justice, which is why I'm studying what I'm studying. But just like college, that's not the only thing I've been up to here in Atlanta. I met Brittany first and foremost, and that's one of the best things that's happened to me in some time. I've also begun organizing down here. And when I talk about organizing, by the way, I'm really just talking about building relationships with the intention of creating social change. Many church communities and church leaders are also organizers. Those things go hand in hand, and I'm gonna also talk about that in a little bit. But what have I been doing as an organizer exactly? I became the political education chair of BYP 100's Atlanta chapter. BYP 100 organizes with a Black, queer, and feminist lens, which really just means that we center the most marginalized in our work. People that have the least, people that are shunned from society, those are people that we account for. So in that capacity, I have helped to start a political education Saturday school so that people can learn about some of the histories of our society that maybe are not taught in schools. I am helping to launch a Black-owned bail fund so that we can help free people from cages. I've been supporting mutual aid efforts, which is resourcing people with money, with food, with shelter, in this time of great need in this pandemic. and I've been writing. I've been writing as much as I can, which honestly is not that much given my time constraints. But yes, I've been writing. Um, and speaking of writing, I once wrote in a poem that I don't know if I believe in God, but I live like a believer. I think Trinity led me to do a lot of internal work, a lot of self-questioning. And Trinity taught me that it is okay to question your faith at times. That's a normal, natural thing. That's a normal part of your relationship with God. But Trinity also taught me how to live like a believer. And I hope that I can share some of those lessons that I've learned in Trinity and that I've connected to my work right now. Um, there are three things in particular that I carry with me at all times. And these are things that I believe drive social justice work. Well, these things are actually beyond the example of Jesus's life, which I've learned that, Christians are having some difficulty following at all times, right? We're struggling with that, and we see that across our faith. But yeah, so there are three things, and let me get to those things so we can wrap up and have a great conversation. The first thing is that this life in our faith is really only about ourselves and God. God is who we're ultimately accountable to. That's the relationship we're supposed to center. Um, is that relationship and really nothing else. That relationship accounts for both what we have done and what we have left undone. And people frequently ask, including my parents, why I am insistent on being so busy and stretching myself thin and engaging in various capacities in the community and things like that. But what I think about so often is how much I've left undone, how much there is to do. If you look at the world right now, there is no lack of need. There is no lack of people power, as I describe it. And if we're thinking about what we have left undone in our relationship with God, it is our duty to that relationship to continue doing, to continue working. I think we think of in social justice, we think about whether or not we're doing enough fairly often. It's like there's some magical threshold of how much we can do. And then once we reach that level, we're good. We're good with our society, we're good with our people, we're good with our conscience. And I don't know that in God there is a threshold like that. There is always more to be done. And that is not to say that we should feel guilt about that. But it should be inspiration, it should be motivation. So in thinking about that relationship, the relationship that I have with God, I think about the motivation to do what is undone in our society, to fix the wrongs, and get people the support that they need and get people into a village. One of the second things that I've learned and taken away from Trinity is that God is forgiveness. That is how God's love shows up in our lives. That's what God's unconditional love entails, forgiveness. And forgiveness runs through social justice. In fact, when we were talking about reaching out to someone who's caused harm and addressing that harm, I was thinking about justice a whole lot. One form of forgiveness that we have to think about is forgiveness of self. I spent a lot of time once I started learning about social justice and all the wrong that's done. I spent a lot of time sitting in guilt. I felt a lot of time sitting in shame. What do we have to be ashamed about? Well, some of our identities, some of the people that we call in our community have caused harm. We have caused harm. There's been lots of conflict. And some of that has been done on our behalf in order to maintain certain privileges. I think about that in the context of being a man in our society and the privileges that come with that. And so the thing about guilt is that it immobilizes us. Guilt does not allow us to do the good works that need to be done. And if we are doing good works from a place of guilt, then maybe our motivations aren't genuine. And so in order for me to fully engage in social justice work, I really needed to forgive myself so that I can move beyond guilt, and then I could be empowered to try to make change where I could. Forgiveness of others is also central to justice. Forgiveness of others is the first step towards healing. There are many people that cause harm in our society that are doing it for reasons that are not based in their own motivations. You know, they might need to feed their families, or they might just not be fulfilled. They might not have a village, and harm is caused as a result of that. But we're all responsible to some extent. And when I think about forgiveness, I think about what is the opposite of forgiveness, and that's punishment. That's pain, further harm being caused. The way our current systems of policing and prisons are set up, they're not set up for forgiveness, God's forgiveness. They're actually devoid of that forgiveness. In my work, I've become an organizer with many people who are formerly incarcerated. I think of Jesus's acts with the most marginalized people that were left out of society. And there was great forgiveness in that. But the way our prisons are set up right now, there is no reconciliation. There is no restoration of those relationships. There is no opportunity for transformation. In social justice, there's this concept called transformative justice. And that concept really means that people can be transformed. You can transform harm into something beautiful. You can transform conflict into deeper relationships. And with the way our society is currently set up, it really has limited opportunity for transformation. And so, there's been a lot of mainstream conversations about defunding the police and abolition, and I think those political terms feel heavy. They feel complicated to us. But really, what some of those things are saying is that we believe in the power of transformation. We believe that love transforms people. And if you believe that love transforms people, then you might start to question whether or not prisons are serving that purpose. And so when people are calling, for example, for closing the city jail and being able to resource people, what they're really saying is, let's give these people a village instead of a cage. And let's see if those behaviors can be transformed through God's love. Something else I learned about forgiveness at Trinity was that forgiveness can be earned. It should be earned. We should aspire to earning forgiveness. Even if we have a certain level of faith that we will get it anyways. Even if we know that God will forgive us anyways, of course we need to be working to earn that forgiveness. That's what repentance is. And so when I was thinking about speaking today, I was thinking about what does it mean to repent through our actions beyond just our words? If we know we've caused harm, if we know we've sinned, if we know we've been prejudiced, what does it mean to repent for those things through actions? I encourage us all to think about it. It's something I think about often, because I, at some point, have had certain prejudices against people that I now share community with. What does it mean to be accountable to them? In my view, my form of repenting is my work, my labor. And it's not necessarily a strenuous labor, but it is a labor of love, a labor of working so that people can experience justice. When I think about, for example, the LGBTQ community, I think about the power that I have in society. I think about how I can walk and move in spaces where they might be shamed. And if I can enter those spaces, then my repent for the prejudices that I once had against that community needs to look like advocating, speaking up against injustice. That's one of the best ways, in my views, of accounting for that harm and seeking forgiveness. Unfortunately, we're not really positioned to demand forgiveness from other people. We can count on forgiveness from God. And sometimes forgiveness from other people requires a little bit of that work. Now, uh, my parents and some community members at the church, you said, get me thinking about what it might look like to try to get into heaven. What would I say to God to advocate for my case for entrance? And I don't, by the way, I can't, don't quote me that we have to actually advocate for ourselves or provide some sort of portfolio or something like that. I'm not sure about that. Haven't been there yet, but I also translated that to my relationships with others. If people were to say, how do we know that you're not prejudiced anymore, Julian? I would have to probably provide some evidence for that. I'd probably have to provide evidence of some action, some repentance. And so sometimes I think, it's not enough just to say we're not racist and to say we're anti-racist. Sometimes we need a little bit of a portfolio of those actions to back that up. What have we done? Who have we spoken on behalf of? Who have we advocated for? And if our actions can't yet justify the statement that we're not racist or that we're not prejudiced, then maybe we have some work to do to earn that forgiveness. When I think about forgiveness, I'm also thinking about the role Christians have played throughout society in our histories. Christians have been both abolitionists of slavery and also slave owners. Christians have, enacted crusades throughout many, many societies and also provided aid to many people. And so we often focus on the service, we focus on the good that we've done, but we also need to repent for the harm that we've caused to society as well, if we can move forward, if we want to move forward. Unfortunately, there are people who identify as Christians right now that are dedicated to spreading bigotry, hatred towards certain people. And, while we have no control over what others do, people who may not be in this specific congregation or this specific community, they're still Christians. And when you think about the archetype of Christianity in our society right now, what do you picture? That's a real question. What do you picture? Because if you think about who is holding up the Bible and screaming loudest with it, many of those messages are not messages of love. Unfortunately, those things are dominating mainstream conversation at this time. And so it's important for us to show and scream messages of justice just as loudly in order to repent for what we Christians have caused. There are many privileges that we hold, not just related to race. One of our privileges is that being Christians and the amount of power that Christians have in our society. It's the dominant religion in this country. And with that power comes a lot of responsibility. And we have a responsibility to repent through our actions and make sure people really know what Christianity is and is not. I think to some extent, we have a responsibility to draw a line. Episcopalians are very tolerant people, have a deep belief that people are entitled to having their own beliefs. That is absolutely true. And I don't think I'd be the man I am without having been instilled with those values. That does not, however, mean that we cannot identify what hatred is. We know what those things are. And if hatred for others is a belief, Sure, people can feel those things, but I think it's our responsibility to identify them and talk about how they're connected to our histories as well. Now, the third thing, moving beyond forgiveness, because I know I've been talking for a while. I'm going to wrap it up, I promise. I've been attending some Baptist churches down here, and so I've become a little long-winded. What I've learned also is that all things are possible through Christ who strengthens me. And Christ really is our relationships. After all, Jesus is at the root of every relationship that we formed here at this church. Relationships are also at the core of organizing. There is no getting people to show up for a march or a rally or a demonstration without having relationships with them in some way. There's a lot of trust that's needed in order to move people, in order to change minds. And so churches, therefore, are poised for greatness in organizing, are poised for greatness in social justice. It's the reason why churches have played a central role in social justice movements of the past. And you have to ask yourself, what's changed? What's changed since those times? Churches across the country are also struggling to maintain, hold those relationships. And that was happening before this most recent uprising, that was happening before the pandemic. But it just might mean that we have to work a little bit harder to form those relationships, to form that trust with the community in order to be poised to organize. I think this church has great intentions of spreading justice throughout the world, and not just the Hartford community. And that has to happen through organic relationships. So we think about our personal legacies very often. I know I think about it very often. For those of you that watched Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton was obsessed with his legacy. It's part of the human condition. But we also have to think about the legacy of the church. What are we going to be known for? What is going to be our stamp? One of the things I think about when I think about the legacy of the church is the service, is the connection to Africa, is feeding people in Bushnell Park. That seems very important, the direct service. And I'm here to tell you that direct service may not change structural conditions. It may not change structural racism. It may not change structural inequities. It may not change structural hunger. And what I mean by that, for example, is that if a sliver of funding that is used for police departments was instead used to feed those in need in Hartford, we would not need to be in Bushnell Park feeding people. If some of that funding was used for housing, we also would not need to house people because the resources would be there. And so not just with our hands in our direct service, should we be helping people? We need to be helping people in more structural ways and reconsidering how our society is set up to care for folks. Most city budgets are overwhelmingly spent on policing and public safety, which is important. We need security. We need people responding to crises, absolutely. But we also have to consider what crises we're creating by having society set up that way. Who are we forsaking? Who are we forgetting about? Who are we leaving out of the village? Because there's a limitation. I've been in Bushnell Park when we've run out of food and there are still people waiting for it, right? There's an immense need. And we can't ignore where that need is coming from, what's generating that need. It's a lack of accounting for people who are not in the village. Organizing is all about both doing direct service like we do in the church and fighting for structural changes that are going to guarantee that people have a village, that people have resources, that people have protection, that people are cared for, that people are loved, that people have mentors, all things that I got through this church. I was born in the church. Well, I was born in Hartford Hospital and I was carried to the church, I believe. Baptized in the church. Uh, and I know Trinity has those things. And what we really need to consider is what steps we need to take to make sure all of Hartford, all of Connecticut, all of the country, all of the world has access to those things. What do we need to change structurally about our society? And social justice is really asking those questions. And fundamentally, like I said, like we covered during today's service, our faith demands it. Our faith demands that we consider accounting for more people, loving more people, forgiving more people. And those concepts are at the foundation of social justice. So I believe I was asked to make a case as to why church communities should be involved in social justice. I believe that I don't have to make that case because that case has been made in the Bible already. That is the close of what I have to say today. And I'm looking forward to your questions and your comments and your feedback. And it's really a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you don't have to clap, please stop.
If you'd like to participate, and I hope you will, with comments or questions, if you click on participants, you'll see that you can raise, there's a little box will come up, and at the bottom of it, it says raise hand. And it looks like that. So
I don't know if I'm supposed to be fielding the questions or what. I'm happy to.
I can call.
Yeah, Roy, tell you what, I'm going to make you a co-host.
Okay.
And Martha, go ahead.
Okay. Julian, I don't remember what you said when you graduated from high school, but I remember being completely blown away by you. So, and you've done it again. You are just amazing. And we are so pleased and delighted that you are able to be with us today and that you have stayed so connected to the church. It has been my privilege for the past few years to be the warden at Trinity Church, which I think is the most bizarre term in the church, but there it is. And so because we haven't had a priest since Father Don retired, I've been busier than I usually would have been as warden. To my delight, we have a very active and connected and committed vestry right now. And in the past couple of months, because social justice and racial justice has become such a huge issue in this country, in addition to the pandemic, we've had a lot of discussions. We had a forum in which we asked people from the parish just to share their experiences of racism. And because Trinity is Trinity, by the grace of God, we're able to have conversations that are not just a bunch of white people talking to each other about how awful it is. And so, as I say, that's by the grace of God. It's not anything we've done. It just has been the Spirit who has brought that about. And so, as partly as a consequence of all of that discussion, we have just begun a task force for racial justice. And we're very much in the infancy of figuring out, what does that mean? What do we need to do? And it sounds to me like you're saying part of it is just continue being who we are, but do more. And we get that for sure. Some of the things we've talked about are looking into our own history at Trinity Church to find out what our legacy is and where did the money come from to build Trinity Church. And we're guessing, since the church was founded in 1859, that there's a strong connection somewhere to slavery, to the slave trade, and that some of the money, came from there. So our feeling is we need to identify our own history and how we have been complicit, in racial injustice in order to move forward on that. But the thing that strikes me is that the danger for the church, particularly in the Northeast, you're in the South where the church is still important to a large segment, I think, of the population. In the Northeast, our experience is that we're seen as irrelevant. And I think that's the great danger for the church. My grandchildren don't have any hostility to the church. They just don't understand why I bother, because they can't see anything in the church that seems relevant to the current situation. So I just wanted to thank you for being here today, for your comments. I love it that you connected us to the idea of the village, because that's such an important concept. And
So
it's just been extremely helpful to me to hear that and to see you and to talk to you. So thank you so much. And thank you, Winston and Ruth, for raising this son.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. I think the church has a lot to offer. I've seen even down here in Atlanta, young people, though they may not be attending what we historically view as places where people convene around spirituality, they're also creating their own spaces. They're creating their own places where there are altars and worshiping in their own ways. So young people are still connected to a higher being, to a higher calling. And the more that churches, I think, show a responsiveness to their needs in the moment, I'm sure folks will be back as well.
Thank you.
Let's see, seeing no hands up. I'm just going to ask a very simple, blunt question. Are you this open with your faith in your other realms of relationship?
That's a good question. I'd like to think so. What do you think?
I think so, yeah.
I think so, yeah. My parents have been reading my writing for a little bit of time now, and they've commented on how often I've referenced God in my writing. It's interesting to me because, again, I'm constantly grappling with what place God has in my life. I have, since I left home, started praying, which my parents might be shocked by. Part of that's this one over here. Yeah, I believe I do. Yeah.
Great.
I
Other
think Al
questions?
has a question.
I think Al does. Okay, I can unmute you. Oops, where'd you go? There you are. I'm asking you to unmute, Al. There you go.
you can hear me.
Yes.
I have two books I wanted to mention because they touched on the themes you mentioned, Julian. And I only remember two of the themes you mentioned, which were forgiveness and love. But the book that covered all of them was The Universal Christ by Richard Rohr. And there's a group of men that are reading this together and discussing it. And I thought it helps us deal with forgiveness and love and resurrection and everything you brought into your conversation. And the other book is God and the Pandemic by N.T. Wright, who has, maybe you've all heard of him, N.T. Wright. But he asked the question, not why are we having a pandemic, but what do we do about it? And it goes back to, we do what the Christians did back when Jesus was walking and teaching. And the what was, we take care of people. We nurse them. We help them. We do what we were not expected to do. And in those days, nobody expected anybody to help anybody else, if I understand this correct. So the church has lasted because of feedings in the park and all the things that we do with our outreach committees. And there's so much of what you've captured in your responses that that I just wanted to add that as supplemental information. Not that you need it, but just that you know it's out there.
No, I need it. I definitely need it. I've written both of the books down. I'll probably order them, and they'll probably, be added to my library. I'll read them slowly, like I'm doing with the Bible and many other books I have. But I appreciate the suggestions.
Susan?
Very good.
Hi, Julian. Thank you for your excellent and thought-provoking presentation. I'm curious to know how your experience in the Baptist Church compares with your experience at Trinity and how they are responding to your message.
Well, that's a good question. My experience has mostly been as a member of the audience. They haven't yet invited me to speak. Given this timeline, it should probably be like 10 years from now when that happens. Yeah. Well, I think my experience in the Baptist church, and by the way, when I was going through confirmation classes at Trinity, we visited a number of churches, including the Baptist church. So I was thankful for that. But my experience has been, well, there's a lot of energy in the services, of course. But there's a lot of focus on having faith, this like unwavering faith in what God can resolve in your life. That's when we leave services. That's always something I remark to with Brittany, just how faithful folks are, and that was not striking because people at Trinity lack faith, but they actually talked about concrete examples where it's like, let your worries go because God will cover you, essentially. So I think that's one of the most striking things that I've experienced. And just, I think with the Baptist people I have met, how much they connected God in various areas of their life. I haven't seen them live quite as secular lives as maybe some other Protestants in the Northeast have. So that's been interesting as well.
Kitty?
Julian, first of all, it's great to see you and Brittany back here again. Figuratively as well as literally. My question for you is the issue of the intersection of sort of gender politics and identity, and how you've woven that into your studies and whatever you may be doing, working towards your doctorate, because I'm assuming you're going to be producing some sort of a tome, and I'm wondering where that will fit in along with faith and racial and social justice.
Sure. Well, the first thing I thought about was I was in my previous lab, I was studying the impacts of sickle cell disease on the brain. And we were looking at how social stress can impact the demographic of people that are inflicted with sickle cell disease, specifically their brains. And my PI was trying to do a study, but he was only using male mice. And of course I had to be like, why are you excluding the female mice from this study when we know women can get sickle cell disease, right? And the justification was more scientific than anything else. He was like, if we include gender, then we'll have to double the study set and so he was like, maybe we consider gender in a future study. Beyond biomedical engineering, learning about feminism and the way that gender impacts our world helped me understand race relations a whole lot better. Things can seem pretty black and white when you're black or white. But when you consider your gender, when you throw gender in the mix and you learn about things that specifically Black women are inflicted by not just, white people, but also Black men, it helps you understand and contextualize your own privilege a whole lot better. And so gender studies and studying feminism was my step into understanding a range of other social justice issues, because it forced me to understand what privilege was and just how violent privilege can be, even without intention. So you're learning about how, you're learning about the gender pay gap, but you're also learning about the mass incarceration of Black women. And you're also learning about, choices that women can have with their bodies and how government is literally trying to enact a lot of those decisions. And so even if I personally am not doing those things, you also start to understand how the culture that's created by gender enables a lot of those forms of oppression. And so that's how I've been able to view a lot of those things through a feminist lens. And I've been extremely thankful for the feminist scholars that I have had the privilege to engage with, because they really opened up that world for me. And I tell people all the time, feminism is where I stepped into activism. Actually, it was at UConn. They had a class action lawsuit. It was 7 young women that were suing UConn for mishandling sexual assault cases. And some of them were my friends that kind of pushed me into activism around that issue. And then from there, the summer after, Michael Brown was murdered. And so I was already in my activism, and then that murder happened, which mobilized many people throughout the country, and really woke many people up. But I don't know if I would have been as primed to start organizing around Black issues if I hadn't first engaged with feminist issues and gender equality issues.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions, perspectives? Is that Suzanne? Please, Suzanne. And then I see Ray. Oops, I need to unmute you.
To let Julian know that I have to leave the meeting, but I thank God that I got to hear him, and wish him all the best in his further development. And I'm just glad there are young people like him. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. And from a personal standpoint, having spent a good bit of my life trying to keep the village going in one way or another, but my academic background is all in mathematics and applied math, and I've made my living as an engineer. I'm pleased to see you with your life spread over both camps, and it can work. I think obviously what has gone on in the country recently has provoked a great deal of discussion. And of course, I work for a very large company because we recently had a merger, so we're now Raytheon, and we've got, I've lost track of how many employees worldwide. And of course, there is I think a legitimately intended reaction from the corporate level to say, okay, now where are we on issues of gender and race? What encourages me, I guess, about what I'm seeing this time is, in addition to all of the pronouncements from on high, there seems to be an actual ability to get in and on a smaller group basis within the organization, actually do things that may over time be able to create villages where we didn't have them before. So I thought that was a very interesting concept, and one that I actually think may be starting to take root, at least in some organizations that are so large that trying to manage everything from the top down, it gives the right impression, but you can't really do it.
No, yeah, absolutely. And so along with creating villages is creating a sense of belonging for more
Yeah.
people. And we talk about diversity and inclusion a whole lot. You can include people in something and they have no sense of belonging at all. They don't feel like they're supposed to be there, which has been a large part of what's been causing Black people, people of color, LGBTQ community, causing them to feel like they don't belong in certain spaces. So we have to think about belonging as well.
Other questions? Julian, I have a question. I don't want to interfere with other people, but I want to take the chance while I got it. You were here for the service, I believe.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. I mentioned the thing about the person who said, we know each other, but we're not really friends. And what I understood her to say wasn't anything alienating, it was something missing, and a greater depth of sharing, I think. And what I'm thinking is for what might your reflection be for our community as it gradually moves forward and not, in the present. How can we, you talked about that sense of belonging, that comment felt to me like there was a lack of feeling of belonging, that I've been here in one level, I do belong, but at another level, I'm not sure I do, because I don't know who I could call. I'm not sure if she said this or not, but somebody said it during the forum. Like sometimes we need a white person to open a door for us with a social service agency or with some outside office or school or whatever it might be, which I really appreciated hearing. Any reflection on how we?
Yeah. I think so. The BYP 100 chapter of Atlanta has spent the last year organizing, essentially forming relationships. We've tried to launch campaigns a couple different times about environmental justice and addressing gender-based violence and things like that, and we failed. We failed to effectively launch those campaigns. And at the root of that was that we just didn't have the relationships we needed. We only started last June, so it's been a little bit over a year, and we were trying to do work that is important, work that we knew needed to happen, but we didn't have the depth of relationships where we could count on each other yet. And so we spent some time trying to form those relationships, and those friendships, those relationships that you're talking about, people we can count on, comfortably count on, is very important to the work. And also I'm thinking about how we're treating people who we don't consider our friends. I think that line between people we are friends with and people we are not friends with impacts a lot of how we treat people, unfortunately. And I don't know that that's a very Christian thing. I think people will feel more comfortable in community when we don't have to be friends in order to treat people really well, in order to be able to count on people. Something I loved about Trinity is that I saw strangers walk in almost every Sunday. People I had never seen before, people that were seamlessly integrated into our service. They could come commune with us. And I love that people did not necessarily need to be card-carrying members of the church in order to experience the grace of God within our walls. And I think about the people that you advocate for, the people that you are able to show up for. Do they need to be your friends in order for you to do that? Do people need to be your friends in order to treat you well? Unfortunately, in this country, because of lasting segregation, many of us are in kind of insular communities to some extent, right? There are seemingly everlasting divisions. And I'm really just thinking a lot about these days how I'm treating people across lines of difference, people that I may never want to be friends with, but I should show up for them anyway. When we were out at a vigil for victims of police brutality here in Atlanta, and I'll never forget this woman who seemed to be homeless, I'm not really sure, walked up to us, and she was just not nice. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
She was very rude to us, like demanding money and she was like demanding our shoes and our clothes and things like that. And I was just like a little bit flabbergasted. I was like, I don't know what's happening right here. Like, we were at a very peaceful event with music and stuff, and this woman comes up to us and just like is yelling at us. We don't know her at all. And she's demanding shoes and a shirt, right? And I look over, and before I know it, Brittany is taking off her shoes to give to the woman. And I had no plans of doing such a thing. Personally, I like keeping my shoes, but Brittany, without hesitation, took her shoes off on a dirty street, by the way, that was outside of a jail. It was right outside of a jail, and just gave this woman her shoes. And was, at that point, I tried to jump in and help, because I'm like, I can't just let Brittany do this. So I was like, Brittany, you can take my shoes, or, you can hop on my back. I can carry you. Brittany's like, it's fine. The woman also was demanding a shirt, and I was surrounded by women at the time. I figured no one else was going to be willing to take their shirt off. So I took my shirt off and I gave it to her. And immediately as that happened, she ran away. Like, she didn't say thank you or anything. She just ran. And I realized that she was trying to catch the train that was nearby. And they're not going to let you on the train without shoes and a shirt. And so I'm thinking about that moment right now, because even though that woman was just like being incredibly mean to us, like off rip, we knew nothing about her. She knew nothing about us. Brittany didn't care at all, and helped her. And I think how we need to be living more often. And so I would probably never call that woman my friend. Maybe I would. Who knows? Maybe she's a pleasant person outside of that context. But I think we still have a duty to help people like that.
Thank you. Al?
I had a question. Well, originally it wasn't a question. It was a point. That language that we use is really important. And Justin said we failed on a particular issue. And using the word fail to me is a demotivator. And I'm going to suggest that instead of fail, we replace it with we haven't yet succeeded. We haven't succeeded enough. We're in the process, something that keeps us going rather than might cause us to give up. And do like social justice, this isn't going to go away unless we let it slip out of our hands. And so we have to keep reminding ourselves we're in this for the long haul, and we're still working on it. And we just haven't gotten to some of the milestones that we wanted to reach at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kate by Road.
they were writing in the chat. Can you go in the chat and see what they're saying?
Is she there?
Can you unmute? Yeah, she is. She knows she's called.
Kate, if you're still on your phone, you're gonna use *6 to unmute.
Not unmuted.
Hi,
There you go.
There you
you
go.
can hear me now. I put it in the chat. A few years ago, I was at a conference and someone said FAIL is actually an acronym, First Attempt in Learning. And I've kept that in my head. It's just a very simple little, like very minor comment. Julian, I'm so impressed by what you've been doing and sharing. And I wanted to make a comment when I read Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that book. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that book too. But as a white, extremely privileged woman, the thing that really jumped out at me was all of his language around the body, and the bodies of Black men. And it was like, but any woman who has any concept at all has experienced all of these things. They work for us in different ways, but that, all kinds of people feel entitled to comment on your body, touch your body, want things to do with your body, and I remember that, vividly as a young woman in particular. There's a reason why the suffrage movement and abolition got going at the same time. And, the history of those two movements got very intertwined, and, people jumped from one ship to the other. It was hard to keep both going. And I think that's a continuing issue is, feminism has had a lot of class issues. And I think one of the things that is an elephant in the room that you alluded to at the very beginning was with your own privilege. You had some privilege even as a middle-class kid who grew up in Bloomfield. That when you were at Jumuke Academy, the kids pointed out to you, hey, you're not really like us.
Yeah.
So that's all, just comments.
Thank you for that. I think that these various forms of oppression at the root are about people's ability to use their power over others. And if you think about it in that context, you can understand some of what Black people are facing and marginalized racial communities are facing. You can understand what women are facing. You can understand the LGBTQ community, because this is all about power, right? At the core of it. And then the intersections of those things, right? So they're deeply connected for sure.
Julian, it's 12:15. And I hate to draw this to a close, but we're committed to. We've been sitting on our butts for 2 hours. So this has just been fantastic. You've given me a lot to think about. Obviously, from the comments you've heard so far, you've given a lot of people things to think about in the structures that you offered us of where you're coming from. There are thank yous already coming over the chat to you. I'm just going to speak without authorization, but we'd really like to stay in touch with you. Perhaps for our own journey into social justice and within the parish, and building relationships within the parish. And wherever we go with this, we'd like to have you be our ally, if you would.
Of course, yes. I am forever a community member of Trinity. That will never stop regardless of where I am, especially because we have Zoom now. So I'm closer than maybe I was before. It seems like my dad was raising his hand for some reason. I don't know if he's waving or what, but.
Go ahead, please, Winston.
Julian and everyone. Julian, you don't sound like you're 26 years old. You sound a lot older. I'm very proud of you, young man. You're really grown up. And Brittany, you look lovely. Thank you for being by his side. And you both are nourishing and treating each other well.
Thanks, Dad.
Okay. God bless you both. Thank you for what you do, what you're doing with your lives. And God bless you.
Thank you, everyone. I'll see you soon.
And good luck with your writing your dissertation.
Thanks. I'm gonna need it and God's grace.
When does it due, Julian?
I'm supposed to graduate around 2023, so I have some time,
Okay.
but I need to do some research between then and now, and not research about community organizing. So I got to get back to my lab.